In this video, I'm going to talk about something rather amazing that my researcher and I had discovered. This is Tony. Hope you're all doing well. We're going to get into some rather curious things regarding Gilgamesh and something I had never heard before that might pique your interest, because I don't think I've seen anybody talk about this on YouTube or anywhere. We're talking about sort of the breakdown of the ancient words. We're also going to get into how this ties into his mother, who apparently was a goddess. We'll get into that and how she actually became his wife as well, and how she may be tied to Lilith. Okay, so we're going to get into that. Now, it's a little bit convoluted and complex, so we won't get into great detail about it, but we'll cover it and touch on it. But I wanted to also talk about some of the really interesting details when you look at the ancient languages that you don't see in English. We'll get into that as well as we get into this video. Now, of course, Cush was the father of Nimrod. And now, when we look at this passage here, it doesn't read the same way as it does when you look at it in the ancient languages. All right? It says here, and Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Uruk, and Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. Now, what's really interesting is when you start looking into the ancient languages, it doesn't read this way exactly. All right, let me read what it looks like when you look at the ancient languages. Cush was the father of Nimrod, who wounded or defiled himself to become a Gibor throughout the earth, or Eretz. He was a Gibor hunter against the face of Yahweh. That is why it is said, like Nimrod, a Gibor hunter in the face of Yahweh. Now, there was actually two types of Nephilim back in those times. You had the Gibor and you had the Apkallu. So the Apkallu were sort of the wise or sage type half beings, right? And then you had, of course, the Gibor. The Gibor were more like the mighty warriors. And when you actually start looking into the ancient languages, it makes a lot more sense. You start to understand what's really being said. Now, when it says here, Nimrod, the name Nimrod, it actually says the word Gibor as well. Let me show you some of this. It literally says Nimrod, a Gibor, meaning to bear something, to pierce, to wound, to defile, to hollow out, to profane, to dishonor, to disrespect. Hahel is the same Hebrew term that is used with profaned when God's sanctuary was profaned. Okay, so the term means to profane. So when it says here, let me show you this. When it says here, let me look at it this way. Maybe let's go over here. Cush became the father of Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. It's literally saying in the ancient languages, who defiled himself became a Gibor throughout the earth. And again, the Gibor are essentially warriors. And I'm trying to find out where it says this here. Yeah, Gibor comes from the root term, means powerful and strong. It is tied to with showing force. So the Giborim were so strong and good at combat that the whole army would a lot of times stand back and let them fight first. So if you ever read some of these ancient texts, they talk about employing giants in their military. And usually they would cost about 10 times as much as employing a soldier. And they would usually put them on the front line of the battle to essentially do most of the work initially off the bat. So they're like on the front line. They're also known, if you look in some of these Roman tales, when they had to deal with the Celts, And if you look back even farther than that in some other historical texts, it talks about how they were very cocky and they thought they were the thing. They thought they were and it makes sense kind of that they would think sort of like that, because if you are the top dog in war, you would think you're the top dog. It's kind of like, looking at some of these, professional basketball players like Michael Jordan. He would, even if he tries to pretend as if he's not, pretends to be humble, he clearly might have a big head in some cases, or at least some of these guys have big heads, right? It kind of goes with the territory of being sort of the guy that's at the front. So that's kind of the case with the Gibor as well. I've seen in these ancient texts when the Romans had wars with the giants, with the Celts, they would talk about that in their writings. Now, getting into some of these other things, so let's talk about the Gilgamesh tomb a little bit. This was something that was discovered back in 2003. Archaeologists in Iraq, and of course this was around the exact same time we went into, of course, Iraq. Go figure, right? Archaeologists in Iraq believe they have found the lost tomb of the king Gilgamesh, the subject of the oldest book in history, and it's actually not the oldest book, but the Epic of Gilgamesh, written by a Middle Eastern scholar 2,500 years before the birth of Christ, commemorated the life of a ruler of the city of Uruk, from which Iraq gets its name. Now a German-led expedition has discovered what it is thought to be the entire city of Uruk, including where the Euphrates once flowed, the last resting place of the famous king. Of course, at that time, the Euphrates was much lower. If you look at some of the ancient archaeology in the area, you can see that once the Euphrates River has gotten lower recently, they've started noticing some of these ancient structures. So the city's been built on top of the ancient structures, and you can see that at one time it was even much lower than what it was, 10 years ago. Of course, recently it's been very low. Euphrates River has been extremely low. That's another topic, but we're not really getting into that here. Now, of course, also they found it around the same time, a few months later, treasure of Nimrod is found in Iraq, and it's spectacular how two men pumped flooded vault to secure missing Assyrian antiquities. So this is, again, what I was talking about. So they actually had to pump it out, the water, to even find this. The treasure of Nimrod survived 2,800 years, buried near dusty town of northern Iraq. It spent 12 years tucked away in a vault until Thursday. It was uncertain whether it had survived Hussein's son, etc., etc. So you can see there that they had found the treasure as well. Now, of course, on top of that, this is from Skiba. He sort of had like a layout or structure to describing Gilgamesh as being Nimrod, and also Osiris being called the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Now, of course, we've talked before about the term King of Kings. So, of course, this, or God of Gods, because if you look at the Psalms, it talks about these beings he created as being gods. And I talked about it in a previous video. A lot of sort of Pentecostal prosperity type preachers would use this verse incorrectly, saying, "Ye are gods, but shall die like men," and it's actually not referring to human beings. And when the King of Kings himself quoted it, he wasn't saying the Pharisees he's talking to are gods. He was just quoting the passage. He was quoting the passage that said, "Ye are gods." He was quoting Psalms. He wasn't saying literally to the people I'm quoting the passage who this is talking about you. It wasn't what he was doing. A lot of people have misunderstood that. He was referring to these beings that he created to rule over nations. And this was after the Tower of course, Babylon, which, of course, he built. So after that, after the time he built this tower, and of course, if you look into the entire story with regards to Gilgamesh, he had actually went to Noah and asked him, according to some of these old ancient pseudepigraphical texts, like Genesis Apocryphon and others, it talks about Noah and some things about him that you've never heard before. We have, of course, also Gilgamesh going to him and asking him how to be essentially blessed like he is. And when he told him, he didn't like what he had to say. Okay, so he decided, no, I reject what you're saying. I'm going to just go do it on my own. And of course, what's interesting about it is he became 1/3 man, 2/3 God, according to the text. And this is a result. One of the reasons this is a result is because his mother was a goddess, from what I can tell. And we're going to get into that also in this video. Let's see here. Where is that? I have so many things open. All right, here we go. I'm kind of jumping around here. Okay, so we have here Lugal-Banda, which is apparently Gilgamesh's father, was a deified Sumerian king of Uruk, who, according to various sources of Mesopotamian literature, was the father of Gilgamesh. Early sources mention his consort Ninsun and his heroic deeds in an expedition to Arata by King Enmerkar. So here is, of course, the mother of Gilgamesh, Ninsun. Ninsun, Lady of the Wild Cows, was a Mesopotamian goddess. She is best known as the mother of the hero Gilgamesh, the wife of deified legendary king Lugal-Banda, and appears in his role in most versions of the Epic of Gilgamesh. She is associated with Uruk. She also became later, and this is interesting because a lot of these stories about goddesses in ancient literature, usually whenever a guy or a man gets with a goddess, what ends up happening is he usually dies later. And of course, interestingly, Gilgamesh's father dies in a strange way, Lugal-Banda. But then what's interesting, even more interesting, is then after that, the mother of Gilgamesh marries Gilgamesh and is his queen. So that's kind of strange, right? That's according to the text itself, where she lives in composition, but she was also worshipped in other cities in ancient Mesopotamia, such as Nippur and Ur. Her main cult center was the settlement Kikal. Okay, so this is interesting, and it depends on the degree of Ninsun's involvement in Gilgamesh's life varies between various versions of the epic, right? So it depends on what version you're reading. But the fact of the matter is, certain versions say that she was his wife. All right? So his mother was a goddess, and then she marries him too. Very, very strange, as you can imagine. So we're going to get in, like I said, we're going to get into a ton of stuff in this video. I'm going to get into sort of what is really being said in the Epic of Gilgamesh, in Scripture, and get into some details about the cities he built, how it is the same person as Nimrod, and actually get into much more. First, though, I got to mention food supply, 25 year shelf life. Link is in the description. For some reason, I don't know where it went. Here we go. This is what happens when you have so much research in front of you, you can't find anything. 4 weeks worth for $177. Link is in the description. And of course, don't get this deal down here, because you can easily buy 3 of this for much cheaper. It's about $530 for 3 months worth here rather than $697. So get the one at the top here. Link is in the description for that. And of course, this book here, The Lost Ways, how great-great-grandfather lived without electricity, how to build a cellar, do things around the house like they did in the old days, hundreds of pages illustrated, considering all the things going on around us. And by the way, I'm going to be talking about that in depth over on my other channel, Sale Daddy 1. And actually, I think I'm going to make another video as well. It might actually go up over here as well. Maybe it'll be my next video. I don't know. Where I talk about what's going on with the food, of course, supply. And interestingly, what a lot of GOVs are doing right now. You're not going to believe what's going on. Actually, I can show you a little bit because I have a ton of those windows open as well. Let's see here. Europe. Okay, so let me show you this one here. Yeah, here we go. So for one, they're trying to get rid of cows. World's first carbon tax on livestock will cost farmers $100 per cow. This is in Norway, right? No, Denmark. This is in Denmark. So they're doing this stuff across Europe. Let me show you something else. They're actually doing this right now. They've actually made another website for this. This is from Bloomberg. Europe is gaming out a food, of course, crisis right now. They're actually making, and this reminds me of the World, Economic, of course, Forum, where they were like saying, oh, what if this happens? What if the happens? And then it happens like a year later. Same thing here. They're actually literally talking about like, what if climate change causes this, or WAR? And you have all these different countries doing this right now. UK's doing this. Canada's doing this. Canada has a website set up for this. I'll show all that stuff over there. It's all at once they're starting to do this. So you might want to get some food supply if you don't got any. All right. Link is in it, or have any. Link is in the description for it in this book here as well. Get the printed version, $37 plus shipping. Link is in the description. Of course, gold and silver's link below. And if you like this video, go check out my website, linked in the description as well, GR Videos. I put up a ton of videos over there that I've made over the last more than a decade. Link is in the description for that as well. Let's get back to the video. So, of course, you might have heard of this statement here. Men of renown, right? That's from the passage as well. It talks about men of renown. And the giants were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went in, of course, to the daughters who bore children. These were the heroes of old, warriors of renown. So, what this is actually saying is that they had famous names. We're talking about, Hercules, Odysseus, and obviously this is before Goliath, but Goliath would be an example of this. Actually, Confucius was a giant from what I understand as well. And a lot of people have no clue about that. They think Confucius is just some Chinese dude. We have, of course, others like Ajax the Greater, Achilles, and, it's interesting because they always try to put these people like Confucius. Actually, Confucius, they don't really do it with. It's kind of funny that they don't do it with him because he was 12 foot tall, according to some of these ancient historical books. But, Ajax, Achilles, it's kind of true, kind of myth. We don't know. It's kind of, that's the attitude they take. Of course, they listen to all these historians saying these things, right? Like Pliny, Flavius Josephus, whoever, Tacitus. They listen to these historians. They say, these are professional historians. They know what they're talking about. And then they cherry pick what they want you to tell you, want you to believe. So they'll say, yeah, what he says over here is completely true. But then when he talks about Ajax here, well, we don't know if that's true because it says he's 12 foot tall, and we know there's nobody 12 foot tall, so it can't be true. So it's just funny. How can you believe anything that these professional historians said if you're not going to believe the entire thing? If you're going to just believe like parts of it and just reject the rest of it, are you saying they're not historians? No, they're saying they're professional historians. Well, then if they're professional historians, then you should be able to believe what they're saying. No, well, you can't believe whatever they're saying. Well, then they're not professional historians. Which one is it? So it's like you can't pretend they're one thing and not one thing at the same. You can't. They're contradicting themselves by doing that. They should just say they don't know history at all. If they're going to just reject parts of history they don't like or don't believe is true, right? Wouldn't that make more sense? You have, of course, the fact is with Ajax, I've shown this before. If you go look it up, he was 12 foot tall. It even talks about here, Achilles' armor was awarded to Odysseus. Odysseus was one of the ones I mentioned a second ago. But here you have a Roman emperor, Hadrian, who essentially took the tomb of Ajax and re-exhumed it because it was going out to sea. It was like thousands of years after he was buried, right? So, and this, of course, was like 2,000 years ago. So 2,000 years ago, he was essentially exhuming a burial site for Ajax that was already there for like thousands of years, but it was going out to sea because for some reason, the erosion, all that kind of stuff, right? So when he did it, they actually measured his length and it was 12 foot. And then they put him in a new tomb. So you even have archaeological evidence from a historical emperor saying that, yeah, we exhumed his tomb and re-put him in a new tomb, and he was 12 foot tall, just like the text said. But of course, that's not enough for historians. I mean, it must be archaeological evidence right in front of them right now. You can't just believe any, you know what I mean? It's just really funny to look at this stuff. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about that real quick. So you have actual evidence like that that's just pretty much ignored because it doesn't fit whatever they want it to mean or what they think is true. And this comes back to interpreting scripture itself, because it's the exact same thing with theologians today in the church, the exact same mentality. Oh, wait a second. It talks about Behemoth or Leviathan. Oh, it says he has a tail like a cedar tree. Well, that can't be true. It must be an alligator. And he's talking about an alligator. I mean, this is the kind of logic they use. So they read something that they can't see currently in reality, and they think, well, it can't be true then. And of course, evolution says it was millions of years ago, so it couldn't be true. These stories from all over the world, from ancient China, from Sumeria, from everywhere, is talking about dragons and giants. None of it can be true, even though everyone talked about it. All the historians talked about it, but we know for a fact scientifically that's not possible because, of course, millions of years ago, right? This is exactly the logic. This is literally the logic. So it's a lens in which they believe, where they read and interpret things, and they believe their lens is perfect. So then, that you get what I'm saying. This is how they interpret scripture too. This is why they translate it incorrectly like this. They think, well, that doesn't matter. They said they were a god, but they're not a god, so just ignore it. I mean, when we say God, we shouldn't just think of like God, big G, God, like the top one or something. We should be thinking about, well, there were beings that he created that had supernatural powers, kind of similar to what you would think of like in the Marvel movies. They have like some power to do this or that. Poseidon had power over the sea or whatever, right? So in the case of Gilgamesh, he was a part god himself. His mother was a goddess. And this is basically the storyline. Now, okay, so I kind of lost track of where I was at. I've been jumping around a lot. Let me find out where I'm at here. So, okay, let's get into the cities they founded. Actually, no, first let's show you this. I'm going to show you one other thing real quick, and then we'll get into the cities. So, of course, also I mentioned how they had found the tomb. Where is that at? Man, I got so many windows open like usual. Where did it go? I showed you the tomb of Gilgamesh. Now, there's also a tomb discovered for Osiris in 1999. So, you had BBC in 2003. They discovered the tomb of Gilgamesh. And then you have the tomb of Osiris in 1999. I think the two are linked because Osiris, I mean, you have the name Gilgamesh. He was a famous, like it says in scripture, men of renown. He was like the top man of renown. Okay. So in other words, he is the most famous man, period. And they actually wrote poems about him, endless texts about this man. There was so many texts. There's even psalms to this guy. I mean, it's essentially like they treated him like a god back then. All right. So this man is tied to the we're talking, of course, the constellation Orion in astronomy. Orion, the historical or mythological behind Orion is actually tied to Gilgamesh. Osiris apparently is tied to Gilgamesh. I've talked about this before on video. I believe what happened was, of course, according to the Epic of Gilgamesh, he was buried near the Euphrates River. Of course, the Euphrates River got much higher and, of course, spread out. So it actually covered his tomb. Of course, recently it's dried out a lot, but this was back in 2003. So they had exhumed, of course, his tomb. And that was, we already covered that. I already showed you the article for that. But Osiris, what I believe is going on with this is I think that, and this is my opinion, because he was part God, I believe he was put underneath the bottomless, or underneath the Great Pyramid in Giza. So the reason why I believe that is because of what the Emerald Tablets of Thoth say. That it says there's another dimension underneath the Great Pyramid. It actually even says there's a bottomless, of course, pit. There's literally an area underneath the Great Pyramid called that. People don't even know that. It's literally called that. And I've actually seen maps where it goes down much farther than they claim. They'll just show you like a little bit down, but it actually goes way down farther. And of course, this is called the Halls of Amenti in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. And I believe Osiris is Gilgamesh. I believe his spirit was put there, and then the entire religion of Egypt was actually surrounding Gilgamesh. This is sort of my theory. And this is why I believe it was put between the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid. And so that's kind of my theory on it. That's just a theory. I don't know if it's true. This is just me trying to put stuff together. But so getting over to some of the other things. By the way, I should also mention really quickly about our game project that we're building, Noah VR. I've mentioned it before. We're going to have giants and stuff in that game as well. It's going to be an action adventure game. It's in VR. So if you have Oculus, and it looks very realistic for VR. It's one of the top games for VR right now. Our programmer, we have guys that worked on Call of Duty asking him for advice on how to make videos in VR. So this guy is like one of the best programmers out there. We're actually almost done with the first iteration of the game. But we're still, if you want to get involved, if you want to support the project and also actually make money in the process where you can actually invest in it, we have an option still left. 22 shares at $400 each. We already had hundreds of people come in already. That's why there's only 22 shares left. There's 550 total. 22 shares left that you can put $400 in and see that this game, we're going to have this game done this year, but we still have to do testing. We have to market it and get all the marketing ready and stuff, but we're going to have it done this year, this game. So then after that, we have to sell it, or we have to get everything. We have to also get all the bugs out of it and stuff like that as well. So we're going to have beta testers and all that kind of stuff soon here this year. So if you want to get involved, once we release this game, we're going to be putting a lot of work into marketing it to make sure it goes very well. You can get you can actually get a percentage, or what do you say? You will share with the others that are part of this in gaining 20% of the profits we make from the game. So out of the 550, they all share of this 20%, and you will get a share of this as well. Some of these games have made millions of dollars. I'm not saying that ours is going to be some super huge hit and make $100 million in 1 year. It's happened though. Games like this have actually done that. Of course, it's a home run when you do that, of course, and it's not that often. I mean, maybe 1 out of about 500 or something do that or something, right? But we believe that this game is going to be a success. I believe it's going to easily make millions of dollars. I don't know if it'll make hundreds of millions, but I think it'll easily make millions. So if you want to get involved, link is in the description for it. And anyway, let's get back to the video. So like I said, and actually I'm going to cover this more over on my main channel as well. But as I mentioned, it says in the text that he is a Gibor. Again, he became a god, or became a half-god, because his mother was a goddess. But from what I understand, according to some of these ancient texts, and I'm not sure if this is how this all fleshes out and makes sense or not, but for example, in the case of Merlin the magician, Merlin allegedly was born of a goddess as well, okay, like a not human. So his mother was not human, his father was human. This is the same with Gilgamesh, according to the story. Somehow Merlin was able to change himself to be a good person. So is it possible for these people to be transformed and then healed? You see what I mean? Like their DNA, of course, would be different, but could it be changed to fully, of course, human? I don't know. But in the case of Gilgamesh, he chose the wrong route. He went the way of being a full-on, I guess you would say, devil, or whatever you want to call it. But that's why he was, of course, building, and that's why his name means rebellion. He was rebelling, of course, against Yahweh. But this is kind of the story, and I'm going to get into more of the words over my other video because I wasn't able to get into all of it. The word champion here actually means those that are put on the front of the battle. They're the top dogs in war. And this is, like I said, when they would employ giants in military, they would usually put them on the front end line. They also cost about 10 times more than an actual normal soldier. Of course, they probably did 10 times as much in battle as well, usually. But of course, in the case of the Romans, they had continued to war with the giants, the Celts, for many, many years. And it talks about how they had actually figured out how to beat these champions, as it says here, is because these champions are very arrogant. It's kind of like, if you could imagine, like, you're the top guy in the NBA, you might get a big head, right? So these guys had big heads. They thought they were the top, they had super big heads, okay? And the Romans were able to beat them because they would all try to work. They were all very individualistic. I can do it on my own. I don't need anybody else kind of attitude. These Gibor were like that. And of course, they were able to defeat the Gibor by working together as a team. So the Roman centurions would work as a team and defeat the Gibor. So this is kind of like the Spartans. The Spartans are well known for working as a team and having very, very accurate movements and military movements and stuff like that. So this is kind of what I'm referring to. But like I said, I'm going to get into tons more. I haven't even got into everything here. There's actually a lot. I was going to talk about the cities. I mean, here I can show you this really quick. If you look at Nimrod cities built, it talks about Nineveh and some other cities, right? Actually, this isn't even all of them. Yeah, here we go. Babel, Uruk, Akkad, Nineveh, right? And of course, in the case of Gilgamesh, it just says Uruk, right? Which is this one here, Uruk. It's just spelled differently. But it says here Akkad and Babel, right? Babylon and Akkad. But if you look over here at Gilgamesh, it talks about Akkad right here, Akkadian, and it talks about Babylon. So it's literally the same person. It's in the same time frame, built. We know at least one or two of the cities are the exact same, and then all the writings are from the cities that were also built by Nimrod. So I mean, it's like super obvious it's the same exact person. And he also built ziggurats, which is exactly what we're talking about, the Tower, of course, of Babylon, right? The ziggurats. He built those as well, and he built a very giant one. So Gilgamesh also built those as well. But like I said, I'm going to get into more over on my other channel. Kind of what some of you guys think. Let me know in the comment section below, and thanks for watching.